Right, we've had our nostalgic moment with John O'Mahony and Johnny Crowley looking back in 2000. Now we're getting down to the deep stuff, the stats, the meaningful metrics on Off the Ball in partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more. And to talk through the meaningful metrics ahead of the All-Ireland football, I'm delighted to be joined by Whoop ambassador Conor Meyler. Evening, Conor.
Evening. Thank you for having me.
And Michael McCarthy. Still waiting for the Whoop deal, but open to offers.
Yeah.
Open to offers. So, Conor, the way this is going to work, I'm told, is Mick is going to give us the stats. You're going to give us the, real life experience.
Yep, not a problem.
What are you going to start with, Mick?
Yeah, so
what do you got for us?
Basically, a couple of little stats and then a conversation with Conor about the All-Ireland. I'm going to start with the league connection between leagues and All-Irelands, because it does matter for this week, because as we know, Galway are promoted Division 2 team, played Division 2 football this year. Since the league was restructured to its current format in 2008, we've had 14 seasons. The Division 2 team has never won the All-Ireland in that time. So what that means is that three have made finals in that time. Cork in 2009, Down in 2010 and Donegal in 2014, but they've all lost. Like Galway, weirdly enough, all three had been promoted that year, so there is something to be said for the momentum of getting through the league. The average league position of All-Ireland winning teams since 2008, 2.64. And in the 14 years of the current structure, the league champions have gone on to win the All-Ireland 6 times, which is 43%. Right. And who are the current league champions, Nathan?
Would it be Kerry?
Who they beat in the final?
I don't want to talk about who they beat in the final.
That's nothing to do with the metrics.
You just wanted to rub it in again. That's fine. Well, listen, Conor, a Division 2 team beating a Division 1 team in a big game. Could it happen?
Yeah, well, we probably have first-hand experience of it this year with Kerry, so it's definitely doable. I think with momentum, with winning games, it does bring momentum, and we've probably seen that this year with Galway and the momentum they've brought and how that's just sort of spiraled. They've had a lot of tough opposition this year, with Division 2 being so competitive and getting out of Connacht with how competitive it is, and then within the championship so far in the All-Ireland series, the momentum they've brought is serious, and I think they've probably had more challenging games, well, up until probably the semi-final than Kerry had, so they'll be well equipped for sure.
Yeah, they have had a tough path. While we looked at it and said maybe they were on the more straightforward side of the draw, because they avoided the Mayo Dublin Kerry, or in particular the Dublin Kerry side of the draw. Like, the whole way through, their teams have been of a similar standard. They've been teams who've been in form through the league campaign, so actually, like, they've won a lot of tough matches.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that tough matches, that sticks with you. When you go to the well in the latter stages of the game, and when decision making can go out the window a wee bit, Galway have been there and thereabouts, and they've stuck tight with teams. So I've no doubt that it'll go down to the wire again this weekend. What else you got for us, Mick?
So before we get into the nitty gritty of the game, just one more. You know I like my historical stats, and I want to do one on droughts, because weirdly enough a drought will be ended one way or another this weekend, and one of them that we know will be ended is that Galway are in their first final in 21 years. This is Galway's longest time to not make a final since they first made it in 1919, which I kind of found a bit surprising. It won't be their longest period without an All-Ireland, though. They have another few years to wait on that, because they had a 32-year drought between 1966 and 1998. So they have another 11 years or so to get over that get over that one. But this one I love is, like, 8 years since Kerry have won Sam Maguire, right? Hilariously, that is their third longest wait for an All-Ireland since they won it first in 1903.
Wow.
Third longest, 8 years.
That's a fairly consistent level of success right there.
Oh my God. So they got 10 years between 1924 and 1933 or whatever it was, and then their famous 11-year famine between 1986 and 1997. And I have actually heard Kerry people refer to that as a famine without any sense of irony whatsoever.
I wouldn't want to say it to my face. Anytime I hear droughts, being from Mayo, and it's 21 years or 7 years, I'm not impressed. It is something we definitely always like to talk about in the media, Conor, is how long it's been and the pressure and the burden that is on players' shoulders. And can't even go back to Tyrone, the sense this year of, well, Tyrone never defended an All-Ireland title. Like, is that a factor? Is that something that's spoken about in dressing rooms?
Yeah, well, just on that sort of period of time, not making finals, we look at Galway. None of the Galway players will have played in an All-Ireland final for Galway. When you look at Kerry, a number of these players will have played in 2019 and previous, so they have that final experience, and that will, without a doubt, stand to them. Although Pádraig Joyce and John Divilly will have know a wee bit more as well from a managerial point of view. I remember in 2018 when we lost the final, personally, I just felt the occasion probably got the better of me and a number of players, and the psychological side of things with the build-up. There's a lot of pressure that goes on there, and within players, you know, friends, families, what's going on in the local town, the local club, and you know that has to be managed from a Galway perspective. For them, it's a case of playing the game and what they've done so well so far, and not seeing it as an All-Ireland final, but you know, as the same game, just on a special occasion. For Kerry, I have no doubt that they'll be well rehearsed in that aspect. With Paddy Tally there as well, you know, Paddy will be keeping very much feet on the ground, and some of the older men that Kerry have will be sort of parting some knowledge with the younger players to ensure that they're up to speed for a big occasion.
Conor, do you think there is a county mentality though that exists? I'm thinking of you guys really. Like, obviously, you know, it was your first final in a long time in 2018, but you would have come into it thinking, you know, it might not be the same people, but when Tyrone rake All-Ireland finals, we tend to win them, you know. And even last year, I suppose there was just a kind of a sense of we're playing against a team who don't really have had problems getting over the line, let's say, to be nice to Nathan. Whereas we know that, you know, Tyrone have this tradition. Does that come into it at all? Or are these days players just so nuts and bolts and we're just focusing on the matchups and the game at hand?
No, I think the psychology is huge. It's probably more impactful than the physical side of things, and even the time between semi-finals to finals now for both teams. Neither team will get fitter, faster or stronger, but tactically and psychologically, how they manage the game and the occasion will probably be the biggest telling factor in the game, I think. You know, how do Kerry manage conceding an early goal, or in the flip reverse, Galway? If a team gets 4 or 5 points ahead, how they handle that, yellow cards, red cards, all those scenarios. And again, decision making on the ball, it nearly feels like with the crowd and the atmosphere, it feels like you've no time on the ball at all. And your decision making is going to be huge. Tackles, turnovers, and that side of things. So the psychology is massive. Whoever handles that pressure better is definitely probably, in my eyes, the team that's going to go ahead and win it.
Mick, looking at goals, and we mentioned the 2000 final there, the first game, the drawn game, there was no goals in that one. It's a bit of a rarity that there's no goals in an All-Ireland final. But Kerry have been particularly mean at the back this year.
Yeah, so I was surprised actually when I seen this, just how mean they have been. So they've played 15 games in league and championship this year and have conceded only 3 goals, which is quite amazing. Cormac Costello's goal in the second half of the semi-final was the first goal they've conceded in the championship. In the league, they conceded a penalty to Conor McManus, and Darren McCurry in your game, Conor, got one past them. The only goal they conceded from play in the entire league. So really tough to score goals against Kerry. I didn't necessarily. That's funny when you dig into these stats. Like, I hadn't necessarily seen Kerry as such a kind of a tight, mean team. You look at Galway, on the other hand, and goals are going to be so important this weekend. Galway have conceded 6 goals in their last 3 games. They conceded 1 to Derry, as we know. They conceded 3 to Armagh and 2 to Roscommon in the Connacht final. A lot of those goals are late as well, let's be honest. But, you know, definitely not as tight as Kerry have been so on the evidence we've seen so far.
During the semi-final, Conor, I was remarking when at one stage Kerry had 14 men back behind the ball. Like, geez, they were tackling like animals and weren't giving Dublin a split second on the ball. But looking at them going, God, you think of the great traditions and the way we think of Kerry football, that if they were to lose this game, they'd get absolutely hammered for being so defensive. But they have the forwards who are so electric that we focus a lot on them rather than how defensive and how they've changed the defensive structure. When you think back to playing them over the last few years, and like Mick outlined, that defensive record, 3 goals in 15 competitive games, is a remarkable record. Are they a very different defensive outfit now?
Yeah, I think that Kerry have probably realised that their defence was their Achilles heel in the past, and that was obviously the reason that Paddy Halley was brought in to try and rectify that. From a Galway perspective, I know last year when we played Kerry, it was a case of throwing caution to the wind as well, and we went without a sweeper. Both teams went without a sweeper, and it was a bit of a shootout. For our goal in the league this year, it was a long kick out, a long kick in, and then a great finish. So there's lessons to be learned there. If you're trying to play with a sweeper, but you're pressing up on a kick out, there's going to be gaps at the back if you can get a long kick out away. And I can see Galway getting joy if they target that long kick out from a Kerry press with some of the height and physicality they have around midfield and in their half forward line, where Kerry are, from a half back perspective, quite small. You might see a change in clientele there from the Kerry perspective. Could Adrian Spillane start? Could Jack Parry and Jeremy O'Connor possibly start if Galway attempt to target that long kick out? But if Galway are conservative, I can't see them scoring goals because it'll allow Kerry time to get back. If they try and transition quickly, it'll open up opportunities. From a defensive perspective as well, there's probably a narrative as well within Kerry and Dublin the last number of years that it's been so attacking and free-flowing. But both teams will play 14 men behind the ball at times, and every team does it. Some teams are just probably quicker at transitioning from it, and some of the forward play is so electric that it grabs the headlines rather than the defensive display. But we've probably seen this year with how Kerry have played that if you can keep goals out, it'll go a long way to winning games. So they've really narrowed down on that, and it's been a huge strength for them this year, and the role that Tadhg Morley in particular has played.
What about the scoring power then, Mick, of the 2 marquee forwards for either side?
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are looking at is, you know, how are you going to go about this winning this game? And it's going to be keeping Clifford and O'Shea quiet on one side, and it's going to be keeping Comer and Walsh quiet on the other. I would have thought that Kerry, if you had, you know, Gainey, Paddy, Clifford, there's probably just a little bit more scoring power there, but the stats actually go the other way. If you look at the Kerry, it seems have a higher reliance on their big 2 than Galway do. It is only slight, but Sean O'Shea has scored 123 so far this year, 13 from frees. David Clifford has scored 113, 7 from frees. That's 236 of the 382 that Kerry have scored this year, which is 46% of their scores. Now, there's a caveat to that in that David Clifford missed 2 games. So, you know, like, one, doesn't he score a lot? Two, you know, that would even be a higher percentage if he had played in the Munster final, for example. For Galway, Shane Walsh has scored 127, 20 from frees, and Comer has scored 2-9 from play, but that just makes up 39% of their scores. So you look at Finnerty, I think he has 13 points so far this season. You know, like, for example, there seems to be a lot more scoring in Galway. Again, another stat that just jumped out at me as a little bit of a surprise.
Tom O'Sullivan has to be in the running for Footballer of the Year. I know everyone expects David Clifford to get it, but he's been outstanding all year at both ends. So you look at the last 3 games, he's kicked 7 points. He kicked 3 against Limerick, 3 against Mayo, 1 against Dublin, and he's only conceded 1-1 in those 3 games. Hugh Burke didn't score in the Limerick game. Kevin McLaughlin got a point, and Cormac Costello got an absolute wonder goal. Does he take Shane Walsh on Sunday, Conor?
Potentially, or Brian O'Begley, who picked up Kilkenny, probably in the semi-final. If you're Shane Walsh will drop quite deep at times, potentially even come back to his own half-back line just to get hands on the ball. So it's a question of, do you take Tom O'Sullivan out that far? I don't know. Do you keep him inside on Finnerty, who has been the real danger man, and as you alluded to, who has scored quite highly? From the stats there, even just listening, I wasn't aware of how many frees the Kerry have scored compared to Galway, and everything Comer scored is from play. So conceding free kicks is going to be a huge one as well. From a Kerry perspective, they nail their frees. Sean O'Shea is on another level when it comes to that. And I suppose even if I take my own thoughts and mindset going into the semi-final and final last year, if you're a Galway player and you're going to mark Sean O'Shea or David Clifford or Paddy Clifford, you have to accept the fact that they're going to score. It's damage limitations in that sense. They're good players who want to play well and they will score. But it's a case of over that 70 minutes, how many contests can you win? And on the flip side, Comer's going to score, Walsh is going to score, Finnerty will score. But it's a case of how many of those individual battles when the ball's put in does the Kerry defence come away with or the Galway defence come away with? Because ultimately those players will score and they will play well. I'd imagine a big day, but it's a case of obviously how many.
Conor, can I ask, I've been thinking about this a lot over the analysis when we talk so much about who takes who, and sometimes it can be, obviously for a marquee matchup, that's fine, but sometimes we're talking about it for 6 defenders. And when you guys are playing Kerry, for example, last year, have you got a player assigned for every Kerry forward, or is it a little bit more fluid?
It's slightly more fluid. I think if you go man-to-man all over the pitch, it will leave gaps because players now are so smart that they will know to pull wide and pull men out. Teams are so well drilled that you can't do that. Keeping that scoring zone compact and tight. You're looking at percentages there where teams are likely to score from. What areas? Then that's the areas you really want to nail down. So it can't be as rigid as that. You will have certain matchups on certain players, and in some cases it'll be a case of you go to town with them and you make sure that you limit even their possession count, because certain players probably when they have high possessions, it tends to relay to assists and scores. Other players, it's a case of picking them up when they reach a certain point or they become dangerous. So for both managers, I would imagine that they will firstly be conscious of keeping the scoring zone compact, and then it's a case of when do we press out, when do we pick up certain players. But somebody like David Clifford, it's a case of you go to town with David Clifford, you can't give him any room or space at all, because he can turn on a sixpence, he can go left, right, his cut, his dummy, he can come out on the loop, and he can also go in behind. So you have to be on your toes with that. And for someone like that, it'll be a case of you stick with him. And I would imagine it'll be the same for Shane Walsh and Damien Comer. The way that Armagh and Derry did on Shane Walsh, they did a job on him, because as I've seen in the past, when you give him time and space, he's a magnificent footballer and probably one of the best to watch.
You have an interesting stat on Clifford, and when we talk about man marking and sacrificing your own game, it does seem that whoever man marks Clifford will have to sacrifice their own game completely.
Yeah, so Sean Kelly is full back and he's captain, and you would almost think he has to take the responsibility of taking on Clifford, but a huge part of what Galway do comes through Sean Kelly in attack. Mick Fitzsimons, I think we all agree, had a very, very good game against Clifford, despite Clifford's brilliance, especially in the first half. But you look at Clifford, he got 4 points in a mark, 4 points from playing a mark, so let's call it 5 points, right? For 3 of those points, Mick Fitzsimons wasn't marking him. Somebody else had taken him because Mick Fitzsimons had forayed up the field. So it's a small stat, but it is an interesting one, because that's a decision that Galway have to make. If Kelly takes Clifford, does he have to completely sacrifice the fact that part of how Galway play is him rampaging up the field?
Conor, that transition then from, say, Mick Fitzsimons stepping forward and somebody else picking up Clifford, is like, for a well organised, well drilled side, should that be quite straightforward, or are you always just going to have? So if it is Sean Kelly and Sean Kelly does decide to go forward, like, is it a straightforward thing for Pádraig Joyce to find another player to pick up Clifford when he's gone?
Yeah, and again, you have to put yourself before the team. But on the flip side, ultimately it's a team game, and it's about winning the game and coming out with a result, rather than, keeping your opposition player scoreless. At the end of the day, that's irrelevant when it comes to the final scoreline. So I would imagine that Galway, if Sean Kelly picks up David Clifford, he will still aim to get on short kickouts, 1-2s, work the ball from 21 to 45, or even to the midfield to a certain point, and then know his limitations as get back as well. David Clifford then may be given the licence to stay in, but if not, he will have to track Sean Kelly which again pulls him out of position. It also tires his legs as he's chasing and tracking rather than staying inside. It's something I probably had to add to my game from previous years, where you get caught up so much on your opposition player that when we have the ball or when a team have the ball, you're adding not as much value as you should be. So that's the flip side to man marking, is can you also put your opposition player on the back foot? Someone like Tom O'Sullivan, as you've alluded to earlier, has done it so well, where he's marked opposition players and he has been like super glue stuck to them. But offensively, he's also adding something as well. So players are having to chase him as well. So it'll be a case of probably rotational. Somebody will always have to be there on Clifford. And on the flip side, someone will always have to be back on Comer or Walsh. But I would imagine that those players will also try and put them, whoever picks them up, on the back foot until they can get back into position.
Conor, Kerry have an incredible array of attacking talent, and there are many great forwards in the game right now. But when you and Tyrone have been preparing for matches over the last 2 or 3 seasons, is Clifford different? Like, do you sit down and spend more time on how you as a team are going to stop him, because you know if you don't, he can single-handedly destroy you? Like, is he that good that he deserves special attention compared to any other player in the country?
Look, he's probably the best player in the country, along with the likes of Walsh and Sean O'Shea from a talent alone aspect. But if you can overemphasise David Clifford, then you lose sight of the players around him. Plus, it's the boys around him who make him tick, the likes of Potty, who will get the ball into him. Sean O'Shea, David Clifford can't do much if he doesn't have his hands on the ball. You take Ronan McNamee marking him last year. I remember speaking to Ronan and just saying, look, this man's going to score. He's a quality player. But, can you win X amount of battles here? 1-1. Clifford's probably going to score 4 or 5 points at least this weekend. But if Sean Kelly makes 3-4 assists, he makes 5 or 6 tackles, a couple of blocks, I would still say that he's come out the right end of that battle, and it'll go a long way to probably helping the team. If he gets too caught up on David Clifford and the team get too caught up on David Clifford, then Kerry have too many other quality players who put you to the sword as well. So you have to look at team first in that aspect.
Mick has done a mountain of work, Conor, to make this easy for you with your prediction, because you've got all the stats ready to go. Go on.
Not really.
How's it going to go on Sunday?
I'm going to go, I like an underdog. I'll go for the outsider. I'm going to go Galway. That said, now, it'll be a case of how quickly they can adapt to the game and without playing the occasion. I'd imagine that Galway is bouncing at the moment in the build-up. Can the players, isolate themselves, even from a Whoop point of view? In the build-up to the All-Ireland final last year, big emphasis for me was sleep and recovery that week, trying to avoid, I would delete all my social media, etc. Try and find time to just quiet time, to meditate, to cold bath, just to keep my focus on the game. And then the closer you get to the game, you want to start thinking about, right, I'm a good player, I've done the work. Let's go out and enjoy this here, because when you're a cub growing up, that's what you dream of. So you're trying to take it in as much as you can as well. I know my Whoop started recording activity nearly that morning because the heart rate was racing with excitement, probably as much as anything, rather than fear and nerves, which would have probably hindered me in the past. So it's a case of, can Galway find their flow states? Can those boys, them key players and them key matchups, can them boys hit the zone where they're just moving, flowing? They realise, right, I'm going to kick a wide here, I'm going to kick a bad pass, I'm going to give the ball away. But when you're in that flow state, none phases you. And I'd imagine that Kerry will be well prepared in that sense. But if Galway can get up to speed, I fancy them to cause an upset.
I'd say myself and Conor's Whoops were at a similar level when Ryan O'Donoghue was standing over the penalty though. Anyways, Conor, great stuff. Enjoy the game.
Thank you, folks. Thanks for having me on.
All right, we got John Giles coming up after 9 o'clock in studio, talking about the life and times of Matt Busby. But Mick's going to stick with us. Arthur's going to join in. We're going to take a quick break.
Meaningful metrics on Off the Ball.
In partnership with Whoop, the personalised digital fitness and health coach that helps you unlock your inner potential. See whoop.com for more.